SBC Media.
Welcome to iGaming Daily, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe. Supported by SBC Summit Latino America, bringing together the leadership teams and product specialists from retail and online operators in Latin American markets.
Discover the potential of Latin America's booming iGaming and sports betting markets at SBC Summit Latin America, the premier industry event in the region. Join SBC at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Miami from October 31st to November the 2nd. Register now at sbcevents.com.
The footballing world is once again engulfed in a betting scandal, but this time round, it is revolving around West Ham United's Lucas Paquetá. Off the back of Brentford's Ivan Toney situation, which saw the England forward found guilty of over 232 betting breaches and banned from football for 8 months, the Football Association has now been made aware and are investigating the Brazilian's involvement in bookings he received in several games. Now, this is according to a Daily Mail article. Paquetá has been under investigation by the FA for the past 5 months, yet this investigation was intensified after Paquetá received a yellow card in the closing minutes of West Ham's 1-1 draw with AFC Bournemouth in the Hammers' opening game of the new Premier League season. This issue involving a Brazilian player probably couldn't come at a worse possible time for the country because, again, if you've been listening to iGaming Daily frequently, you'll know that they're on the cusp of launching its newly formed regulated market, and this will be kind of an angle that we'll be taking on this evolving story on today's episode of iGaming Daily, sponsored by SBC Summit Latino America. And joining me to discuss all this is Lucía Mouriño, Joe Streeter, and Isadora Marcante. How are you all doing today? Lou, you've been ill for the past couple of days, so...
Yeah, my voice is not great, so I apologize for that.
I mean, you sound fine, but when we did when we trialed this a few days ago, your voice sounded so bad, but you sounded so much better.
Yeah, well, it was tragic.
Tragic's the right word to use. Joe, you okay?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, thank you. Looking forward to the SBC Summit in Barcelona. Exciting times ahead. Looking forward to getting some sunshine and, yeah, happy to have some football back as well, even though Man United have been pretty hit and miss, mainly miss so far this season.
Yeah, for clarity, myself and Joe were both Manchester United fans, and I feel like we get this every season. We never have a bright start to the season, but we just manage to scrape results together. But I'm happy. Premier League's back, and can't ask for more. Isadora, is everything okay? Because there's a bit of background noise on your end.
Oh, everything's okay. I just live in a noisy city, but it's a great city. We have the beach, we have the sun, but we have noise as well.
Well, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, I suppose. But no, it's good to have you on. And we are going to be talking a bit more about Paquetá's investigation because it's an interesting one. And for me, it kind of came out of the blue because at one point I was hearing that it was a 50 million move from West Ham to Manchester City. The next thing I'm hearing is the move's off because of this investigation. And again, I'll stress this because this question relates. It was out of the blue. So for our guests, I'm going to ask you this. What is the most out-of-the-blue footballing moment that you can remember? And I will give you mine for an example and just also give you time to think because this is a spontaneous question. You're not prepared for this. Mine was Dimitar Berbatov moving to Manchester United. Because, listeners out there, if you can remember, he was off to Manchester City and I believe he was either at the airport or just getting onto the plane when Sir Alex Ferguson and Manchester United rang his agent and hijacked the deal and diverted the plane and his transport to Old Trafford to sign the deal. And I believe that was on deadline day as well. So that was my kind of out-of-the-blue moment because I thought, whoa, that came out of nowhere. And I really liked Berbatov at the time. So, go on, Luke.
The Rossi signing for Boca. Because he always said that he liked the idea of playing for Boca, but as we all know, he only played for Roma. And then he ended up playing for Boca and he retired there. So that was huge, like a world champion playing for a South American team.
Okay, that's a good one. Joe?
So it's really hard to say it's out the blue when it's over a whole season. But I was actually sort of thinking about something of this ilk the other day, and the riches in football at the moment, the strength of Man City, the strength of Saudi-funded teams and whatnot. It's hard to imagine a moment like this ever happening again, even though it did happen in the modern era. But it's hard to say out the blue. But over 38 games, Leicester winning the title was the craziest, most left field thing I think I'll ever see in football. I don't know there'll ever be another campaign like that whilst I'm alive.
Yeah, I mean, when I was following that season, I was like everyone. I was just in absolute shock that they continue to keep up with that momentum and that just staying at the top of the league. And even when they won the league, I used to work for Showsec, which is a steward in an events management company at the time, and we went down to do the trophy parade, to crowd management there. So in Leicester, we did the trophy parade there, and even when they drove past me with the trophy, I was still like, I still can't believe this is happening.
Okay, yeah, it was utterly breathtaking, that whole campaign for Leicester. It was just fascinating to watch. And if I can sort of double up, one of a similar ilk was a few years prior, maybe more than a few years, but one that was a little bit more out the blue, let's say, was Wigan beating Man City in the FA Cup final. I don't think anyone predicted that, and that was quite incredible.
Yeah, who scored that goal now? It was the ginger player, was it Watson?
Yeah, Ben Watson. It was a header from a corner, right? That was the only way they were going to do it, but from a corner.
Yeah, to be fair for Wigan, that was a great moment for them and completely unexpected. No, we've had some good ones at the moment. So Isadora, no pressure, but high standards now. The bar has been set high. Give me your out of the blue footballing moment.
Well, I don't recall any outblue football moment, but I would say that this moment that we're living in Brazil now is the most outrageous ever. We know that match fixing was always there. It's not something new, but right now the amount of cases that are coming out are just like ridiculously enormous that threatens the sports integrity and the sports betting industry itself. So I would say that I don't recall a football out of the blue football moment, but this I would say that's the most outrageous for me right now.
That was Isadora just like, let's forget this fluffy question and get into the topic at hand. That's what she was doing right there. I'll answer one for you. Neymar to Saudi would be an out of the blue one for me.
True. That's a good one here. Yeah.
You took the words right out of my mouth there, James. I was just thinking Neymar to Saudi is the exact type of moment we're after here. That was, what a bonkers transfer.
Yeah, but you know what? Isadora doesn't want to talk about that. She wants to get straight into the topic. So we're going to follow Isadora's lead now. She's dictator. She guides this podcast, not me, the host. So Isadora, we're going to come straight to you now.
Okay.
This you've already mentioned. There's been quite a few betting scandals in Brazil. What kind of effect do you think this has on the CPI that's kind of analysing match fixing and consequently kind of the sports betting regulation in Brazil? Because again, we spoke about this frequently on this podcast.
Yeah.
Like it's about to happen. It's about to launch. Couldn't come at a worse time, no?
Yeah. Well, if we were talking about that like 2 days ago, I would say that Paquetá's case, I don't see like much of effect that could have on the CPI. But now that they didn't show up, they didn't answer the invitation that before was mandatory, but the Congress managed to change this rule to invite them to testify, not to subpoena them to testify. And they just didn't show up. Paquetá and Luis Henrique, both of them that they're being investigated. I don't know what could happen right now, because they are talking about making it an obligation for them to testify as like they are being investigated, not as guests. So probably we have two scenarios here in my head that I think that could happen. First is that nothing will change that much. I mean, they will investigate, they do what they have to do, like they are doing with the CPI for the past, I think, like a month or two that they are doing this. Or since it's a public figure that is very well known, very famous, plays for the Brazilian team and for the West Ham, who is not like doing anything about it until like a conviction. Maybe they will do something, like they will penalize them more severely, probably, just like to send a message. I think that these are like the both probably both the two scenarios that we can see in this case, because the parliamentarians are getting very angry with this topic. They are like trying to ban ads from influencers on sports betting. They're trying to make it illegal to make advertising. So I think this could be a bit more harsh because of the Paquetá case.
Let me add something real quick. The invitations that used to be mandatory were to testify in person. And when they changed this rule to be just like optional for them, it was so they could participate online, because they're taking into account that the seasons in Europe have already started. So they know that Paquetá and Luis Enrique can actually travel to Brazil to testify. And I think that they decided so far not to participate because it could be seen by the FA as Paquetá admitting guilt, and if they testify, they could end up incriminating themselves.
No, just they didn't answer like to the invitation to testify on the CPI, and now the parliamentarians are trying to, like, they are considering to make it an obligation again. So they will get together, they talk about it, and they will probably say, no, okay, no, you both have to testify right now. You're not being invited. You are requested. Yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of want to bring Joe on this because, Joe, you're the editor of Insider Sports, so you've been covering quite recently a few match-fixing cases involving footballers. One of them, obviously, was the high-profile case of Ivan Toney. Can you just kind of provide your, because you're more of a European perspective, can you just provide that perspective and just your view on the whole situation?
Well, two things to add here, really. The first is, I'm not going to try and explain the intricacies of the CPI investigation, because that's very much Lou and Isadora's bag. They've got that covered more than me. But what I will say is, I think maybe Paquetá learned from Ivan Toney a little bit, who half cooperated early in the proceedings. Allegedly, he did say some stuff. He did speak to some people. He did a couple of interviews, but he did incriminate himself a little bit. He didn't do himself any favors in the things he said early doors in the investigation. So maybe Paquetá is pleading the fifth here and going no comment early doors because he saw what happened to Ivan Toney. I think the other thing I would like to add here is, whilst I don't know if this case will impact the CPI process, what I do believe is, and this is from speaking to Lou, speaking to Isadora, speaking to Jess in the USA as well, it shines a further light on macro betting, and the betting markets that we offer in the UK are pretty crazy from the North American and the South American perspective. Betting on bookings is something that is quite unique. It's quite it's quite interesting, and I think it shines a further light on that type of betting and the potential corruption risk it brings.
Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure if you ask anyone on Paquetá Island, they'll say he's innocent. Absolutely no bias there. But Lou, I'm going to come to you on this one because in South America, this is seen as quite an uncommon type of bet, and Joe's already mentioned, it's quite unique for yellow card bookings kind of to be in probably the UK market as well, because I've always known it to be a thing. Can you just explain a bit of the kind of the details behind the actual allegations itself?
Yeah. Well, just to go back to what you said at the beginning, it was kind of out of the blue, but it was actually the result of a 5-month investigation that ended up seeing the light of the day after one specific yellow. And one of the things that got the FA's attention was the type of bets that were made. So basically, in order for the bets to be successful, both Paquetá and Luis Enrique needed to get a yellow card. And what we know so far is that these bets were made through an account in an island in Rio de Janeiro, like you said, where Paquetá was raised, and they were created the same day of the first match that's being investigated. And not only they were open the same day of the first match, but also the people who placed the bets made huge deposits, actually the highest possible amount. So that also raised some flags, including an integrity alert, which is what basically let us know that there was an investigation going on, even if the FA hasn't said anything publicly.
You know, on these type of markets and the yellow card markets, I think it follows a trend, because I think what we saw with Kieran Trippier with the transfer markets, a market that's relatively unique, definitely more European, and definitely more open to corruption, where Kieran Trippier dropped a hint to his friends, or told his friends that he was moving to a club, and they then wagered money on it, and Trippier subsequently got in trouble. I do think what the case with Paquetá will prompt is an examination of these markets off the back of the Trippier one as well. I think it's interesting to see how that plays out.
Mm-hmm. Have you all seen the yellow card for the Bournemouth game?
Yes,
I have.
Yes.
Yeah. It's in hindsight, it's not subtle, is it?
It doesn't look great, does it?
Bit sus.
I think, just like Joe mentioned, in Brazil, they raised this question of banning this type of bets that depend on one player, or they are open to corruption. And they raised this question, like, should we ban this? Should we not allow people to bet on these markets? And well, in Brasilia, when we had the Sports Summit Integrity, Mansur, who is the special advisor of the Minister of Finance in Brazil, said that they do not intend to ban this type of bets, but there are so many parliamentarians sending law projects to ban these types of bets. So maybe this Paquetá's case will raise up this question again, and maybe we'll see something different happening from now on regarding these markets.
There have been similar calls in the UK for these type of markets to be banned, but as it becomes more competitive amongst operators, the sort of micro bets, the small bets, whether it's on shots on target, shots off target, player tackles, player passes, they've actually grown, and they've become more and more prevalent in an operator's offering. So, yeah, it's interesting to see whether operators will be forced to sort of hone down on them markets, whether the betting of like a shot on target is as vulnerable to be exploited as a booking market, let's say, remains to be seen. But some of the football I've watched this season, it's certainly, I don't know if a player could force a shot on target. So I don't know.
See, another question this kind of raises yet again, off the back of the Ivan Toney situation, is it creates kind of a Mexican standoff between betting sponsors, football clubs and the players that represent it, and fans themselves as well. Because it's a weird one where Paquetá and Ivan Toney, a betting sponsor, is absolutely fine to use his image to promote his product, but he's not allowed to bet on a sport, which it kind of raises the question. But then also he's an influencer to the young kids because of just the profile that him and Paquetá, Ivan Toney and Paquetá are. So do you think with this Paquetá and West Ham and Betway, do you think this could jeopardize the contract between them moving forward? Or is it like the Hollywood bet situation, Ivan Toney, where nothing will really come of that? And with the Premier League kind of voluntarily scrapping betting sponsors by 2025, will there not be any really major consequences because it's coming to an end soon anyway? Joe, I'll come to you on that one actually, because inside the spot.
Yeah, well, I think there's a real stark difference in the what we know so far. Anyway, that we need, obviously information needs to come to light, but there's a real fundamental difference between Lucas Paquetá and Ivan Toney, and I think that is that Ivan Toney was a problem gambler. He was addicted at the time. He was going through issues. He was he was a vulnerable person, which is. Which really does highlight that anybody can succumb to problem gambling, and that's very different to somebody allegedly being corrupted. I don't know the full details. I don't think anybody knows the full details yet of the Lucas Paquetá case, but there are no sort of indications that he was a problem gambler like Ivan Toney. And I think that paints it in a very different light. It's also worth noting that with the Gambling Act review, players aren't going to be forced to promote gambling sponsors, whether that's through religious beliefs or whether that's through something like what Ivan Toney is going through. They're not going to be forced to. So that will be interesting.
But it still raises the question of kind of football players' relationships with their clubs and sponsors as well, and I think it's something definitely to stress, kind of moving forward. And Louis, I'd be good to actually get your kind of thoughts on this from a South American perspective. Could this kind of, even if he is cleared, could this jeopardize the contract between the clubs or not? Do you think this isn't really, or could it not be a major issue?
Well, we still need the details, so I'm not sure if it's like a really big thing or we're making it out a big thing because he's a Premier League player. But if we didn't see many changes with the other cases, I don't think we'll see much action around this one.
Okay. And kind of, we'll just round up the podcast now because we are running out of time. But second to last question, is there kind of a simple explanation as to why the league is kind of failing to protect the sport and athletes? And essentially, what else can each club do to prevent these kind of gambling issues with players, involving players, from happening?
I think more education is needed. Like, the betting industry often provides information, like workshops and more. And then from the team side, it's usually done through FIFA or the respective associations, confederations. So maybe one of the things that could be implemented are initiatives coming from the clubs themselves.
I think I said in the Ivan Toney situation that education moving forward is imperative for players, because it's not been the first. I know the Paquetá one is the allegedly, so let's just kind of go with players and gambling connection overall. It's always been heavily linked that players are not addicted to gambling, but they gamble quite a lot on like the casino side of things. So I think education is definitely needed in this kind of situation.
Yeah, I sort of, that was something that Ivan Toney cited, right, with when he did the interview, the quote unquote tell all interview with Stephen Bartlett on Diary of a CEO.
Diary of a CEO.
He said like there wasn't enough education about. He wasn't 100% sure of the rules. I'll be honest with you both, though. I take a different opinion here, and this is not to discredit Ivan Toney. And you two both obviously think different, but if you're a professional player and you don't know that you can't gamble on football, especially now we're talking about gamble on your own team, I think, I don't know. There's something very wrong there. I'm not trying to discredit anyone, but I think you've got to be aware of the rules if you're a professional footballer. I guess the other thing that you raised there, James, is obviously footballers are bored. They've got a lot of money. They've got a lot of spare time. So they're going to play online casino or bet on the horses or whatever. The education around being sort of sucked into to developing a problem, I guess that that makes a lot of sense. And there are a lot of people that do a lot of good work on that front. But I think if you're a professional footballer and you don't know that you can't bet on football in your own country, let alone football in your own league or from your own club, there's something gone very wrong there. But I think there's enough knowledge out there to know that you can't do that.
I agree with Joe.
I think those lines are very clear.
I agree with Joe on that. We know that we have a lot of information out there. Like professional footballers should know what they could and could not do. And I also believe, James, that education is key, is necessary. But I don't think you educate an adult. I think you have to start with the young ones, like the kids that want to become footballers, who want to become professional players. Then you can start. Then you can see a change there. I believe, right? It's my opinion. Like in with education, but when you're an adult and you are like playing for Premier League, or you're playing for the highest categories of football leagues in the world, it's your duty to know what you can and you cannot do. So I think that what the clubs could do apart from education is you just have to penalize these athletes. You have to show that, okay, this is not right. You have you'll pay for it. It doesn't matter what they're gonna do, but you'll face consequences of your actions. Maybe this will avoid other players to do this kind of things.
Mm-hmm. I think on that note, I don't know how Premier League, I don't know how clubs would enforce it. When you mentioned educating as kids, I don't know if the legal age here is 18, so I don't know if educating children who play for football clubs at a certain age might be a bit exposing them too soon to kind of gambling products. But I can see where you're coming from. The earlier you kind of educate them on these matters, the more it'll stick.
They're already exposed though, because they see it on TV.
Yes, and here in Brazil, São Paulo football club is doing this kind of work with kids, which is very interesting. They showed up at the Sports Integrity Summit in Brasilia, and they just show how they do, how they expose children to integrity situations, and they have to make a decision to know if they understood what are morals and principles and values. So this is very interesting to do with kids. You expose them to certain situations to see how they would react. And I think that's a nice way if you're dealing with younger ones. But with adults, I don't see a very fructiferous outcome. They're adults already. So
I have to highlight something though, because we're assuming that these are adults that have lived a normal life like ourselves, but at the same time we have to keep in mind that first of all there's a cultural difference between South American players and European players, and second, most of these, not most of this, but just a lot of Brazilian players, Argentinian players, Colombian players who are super young. They're not even 18 and they're already being sold to Europe. So we're assuming that these players who have been playing in the top categories already have that education, but they skipped a lot of steps and they're going straight to Europe, straight to the top leagues, and maybe they didn't have that. And we're also assuming that they understood what they were during the youth categories when they were playing in their home countries. I think it's a really complicated issue, but at the same time, I'm not against educating adults either, because everything is changing all the time, and it's not something that's set in stone, and it's something that it's developing constantly.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. But just one thing that I would like to add here. I know that we are running out of time, but I've seen some contracts between players and clubs, and they have in the contract the clauses what they cannot do. And especially here in South America, I don't know how it is in Europe, but in South America, the contracts usually have a small paragraph saying that the players cannot engage in any type of sports betting. It's written there. It's in the contract.
But I'm not saying that, not the players.
I know, but it's written in the contract.
I don't think they're reading them.
Oh yeah, I know, but we assume that the player is reading that, or the lawyer is giving him this information. But that's why I said that the education is key. When you are being put in this ecosystem, like when you're training to be a pro, because you don't become a pro with 12 and 13. So if you teach the kids how to behave and what is right and wrong in these early ages, when they are 17, 18, and they are sold to Europe, for instance, they will know already what's right and wrong. So I think like if you educate them like in a young age, you just like reduce the chances of them like committing this kind of violations.
I'm going to let Joe just kind of finish off here, and then we're going to round up the podcast because we have run out of time. So, Joe, if you want to round off with your final point.
Yeah, I just wanted to, the journey of education, it's really important that is continuous. It starts at a young age and then continues even post-career, really. I think in the UK, with a really mature betting market, we've seen players retire and then they're even more bored. Then they've still got a lot of money, but they're even more bored. They've got even more time on their hands. And we've seen some terrible cases in the UK where players have sort of continued and their gambling addiction has got worse after they've retired. So I think that education journey and that awareness journey as well, it's important that is started young, but then it is important that adults are continued onto that process as well, and they don't develop problems after they retire. Obviously, that's not an integrity issue, but it is an RG issue for sure.
But we could talk about this for hours on end, and I know that's such a cliche saying to round off the podcast, but we really could. And Lou, Isadora, Joe, thank you for joining us today. For the listeners out there, this story will keep on developing, so keep your eyes and ears out on our podcast, while also on Insider Sport, where Joe will be on top of everything, and on SBC Notícias and SBC Notícias Brazil as well. I'll leave all links to relevant articles in the description below. Again, Lou, Isadora, and Joe, thank you for joining us. And to our listeners out there, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of iGaming Daily, brought to you in conjunction with SBC Summit Latino America, being held at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Miami on the 31st of October to the 2nd of November. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News Network. Happy reading.